Helo, croeso I Policy Pod. Hello and welcome to Policy Pod from Colegau Cymru, and in particular it's the fourth of 5 podcasts in our series where we were looking at each of the 5 themes of our policy ask for the next Welsh Government. In this episode we'll be discussing the theme that looks at better skills and business engagement. And here's a quick reminder of our asks for the next Welsh Government. We want to see skills and FE policy working to ensure that company skills planning and business support services are more consistently aligned and coordinating in both physical and virtual environments, with FEIs operating at locations or hubs for business support and services such as Business Wales and Farming Connect. Working with colleges, the Welsh Government should improve the skills element of the Business Wales and Farming Connect services. They should do this by building closer links with FE institutions, offering flexible accredited training for SME business owners and their staff, and by responding to the local needs of the business community. Together, colleges and government should establish a centre for vocational education and training, and this is to enhance dual professionalism, strengthen collaboration between businesses and colleges, and support the practical application of innovation. The centre would also provide access to new technology, particularly to SMEs, and strengthen supply chains between business SMEs and their anchor companies. Following on from the findings of the Economy, Infrastructure and Skills Committee of the current Senedd, the government should reassess the impact of regional skills partnerships, the Apprenticeship Advisory Board, and the Wales Employment and Skills Board to see if these functions could be streamlined or undertaken more effectively, potentially within or by other organisations. And looking ahead, these bodies should have effective governance procedures to enable independent and evidence-based planning with schools, colleges, and universities, as well as the development of apprenticeships. So for the full text of our policy asks, please visit our website colegau.cymru. I'm Iestyn Davies, Chief Executive of Colegau Cymru, and joining me for this discussion is Principal of Pembrokeshire College, Barry Walters, Chief Executive of Group Certificational Menai, David Evans, and Colegau Cymru Chief Executive, Karen Phillips. Croeso I chi gyd. Karen, can you tell us about Colegau Cymru and how your college works with businesses and employers to support skills planning?
Of course, bore da pawb. Good morning, everyone. So Colegau Cymru is a general FE college based in the central South Wales valleys. We cover the districts of Caerphilly and Rhondda and Taf, and we've got 850 staff, about 9,000 learners, and just over 1,000 active apprentices. We work with about 1,200 employers across our region. So a good recent example of us working with a business for skills planning is the work that we're doing with Transport for Wales. So we've worked with them to develop a level 3 train driver apprenticeship pathway for Wales, and it's currently out for consultation. So this is an example of a qualification that wasn't available in Wales. There's a big demand because Transport for Wales need to recruit 200 train drivers, and we've helped them develop the qualification that's going to be key to this area of work.
How could you improve what you're currently doing, do you think? And in particular, bearing in mind our research report on the nature of the economy in Wales, how could you in particular support SMEs?
Well, I think we already support quite a lot of businesses, and we are very much involved in planning their skills with them. So you'll get some employers who will be perfectly happy to take learners from our courses because they know that it gives them the skills and the competencies to work in their organisations. But others will want us to tailor them. So, you know, they may want some practical elements introduced. They may want some softer skills introduced, and we work with them to do that. I think in terms of how we could improve to work with more SMEs, well, the report talks about the missing middle, that there's not enough small and medium-sized firms willing to grow and be sustainable. We've got too many micro firms. And so in some ways, perhaps what we need to do is to bring business services to work much more closely with FE so that we can provide that advice and guidance and support to enable lots of these micro companies to grow into SMEs.
David, Group Certificational Menai is perhaps one of the largest group FEIs in Wales, particularly in terms of the land mass it covers. What's life like in Group Certificational Menai in terms of working with businesses? I know you've got a training subsidiary, you've got a designated support service for business. How do you go about working in partnership with businesses, and particularly rural businesses?
We've, as you know, we've structured the group in that the business arts function is a dedicated delivery arm, not within the three colleges. And we are currently looking in the middle of a 3-month relocation of business arts, and we are moving business arts onto business parks. So we are going onto the Park Menai Business Park in Bangor and in Abergele, so that we have 2 dedicated centres right in the middle of industry and employment, so that we're on the doorstep, trying to break down the barriers, as it were, of the tradition of people not wanting to come over the threshold of a college, that we are seen more as a business support function rather than as a college. So we're trying to change the image really for industry and be working with them on the business parks. So that's our strategy currently.
And Karen, that sounds a bit like the situation, particularly in your main campus in Nangarrow, where the new build was located right in the middle of a busy retail and business park. Is that correct?
Yes, we are. We're on the edge of Park Nangarrow, which has a lot of employers, a lot of whom work with us. But maybe a better example of how this has worked, thinking about what David has just said about being closer to industry, is a scheme we've got running in Blaenau Gwent. And this was where there were a fairly chunky number, maybe 20, 25 businesses who wanted to grow their business, but they weren't really big enough to support apprenticeship schemes. So they identified they had succession planning problems. And so what we did was work in the college in partnership with the local authority, in partnership with the Welsh Government. We created a shared apprenticeship scheme. There's a training facility located in the middle of the industrial area that these businesses work in. And it required quite a different approach. So it was not a case of, oh, well, how do we do this? Because the existing mechanisms didn't actually work. It was more about what do we need to do to help these businesses create high quality jobs and to grow and thrive.
And Barry, how does that compare with Pembrokeshire College? Tell us a bit about the college. It seems to me you work across a wide range of technical and vocational areas, from petrochemicals, marine and maritime, and of course tourism.
Of course, I think provision of business skills support. We see this as a fundamental part of our role. There are a couple of things I'd like to touch on, if I may. First of all, is we've well and truly embedded the concept of an employment bureau into the college, and this supports business by providing them with access to our student community for their adverts and highlights opportunities that are emerging. We support them by taking a first trawl through applications. We set up interview schedules. We accommodate the interviews. And then the Bureau also supports students with CV writing skills, interview techniques, and how to search for jobs, etc. So outcomes this year are probably not as buoyant as in previous years for obvious reasons, but we've had 220 students engage in skill support sessions, and over 100 learners have been put into either part-time or full-time employment, including 10 apprenticeships in the engineering sector who were struggling to find the kinds of individuals they were looking for before coming to the Bureau. So that was one thing. And the other thing I'd like to say is that the other way we can support our local industry is by setting up sector forums. And I'll give you one example, and it's probably the most highlighted one down here in the southwest at the moment is the energy sector. So we've set up an energy forum group made up of employers and providers, and the group recognised there was skill gaps in the area and want to try and target those who've lost employment to upskill and retrain them for the emerging marine energy sector. So there's significant developments taking place down here, Iestyn, in relation to floating wind, tidal and green energy. And we're seeking various sources of funding to support the businesses to help them to upskill. Pembrokeshire is being regarded as an emerging energy hub. It's got the Pembroke Dock Marine, it's got the Haven Waterway, access to the Celtic Sea, and floating and offshore wind has growing support. So we're looking now to develop skills training that aligns to the needs of these companies that are looking to come into Pembrokeshire. And I know David up in Llanrwllio has had a very successful apprenticeship scheme with RWE. we're hoping to see something like that emerge down here as we move into the sort of offshore wind and tidal energy.
As Barry points out there, David, you've done quite a lot of work in group conditional MENI with the offshore wind business community. You also have a traditional, obviously, farming sector literally on your doorstep. Whether it's emerging technologies or traditional farming methods or other areas of the foundation economy, how important is it that your response is flexible enough to allow employers to engage with you? And is it flexible enough? Could it be improved?
Well, I think it's about actually designing the product with the employer. We're currently now out to planning for a new engineering centre at Hill. That has been co-designed with RWE Energy, with the facilities that they really wanted. It's, for example, got a 3-story indoor wind turbine within it. So, you know, is that kind of working with industry so that we fully understand, not second guessing what they want, but working with them hand in hand. The other area I wanted perhaps to explore as well, yes, it was not only training, but knowledge transfer, because you're aware of the Food Technology Centre that we have at Llangefni. And that is doing remarkable work with the food industry across North Wales in terms of developing new products, advising them on shelf life, getting them through quality systems for the large supermarkets, etc. And I really do feel that FE could be providing that kind of service in other areas for SMEs as well, not just in the food industry. So certainly moving forward, I would like to see FE colleges becoming knowledge transfer hubs, not research centres, which is what universities are. That's for the domain of the universities, but knowledge transfer hubs where we are able to transfer technical knowledge to make our SMEs really competitive and developmental, and really get up the economy.
And I first met Martin Jardine, the manager of that Food Technology Centre, on a trip to the Basque Country, where they've taken a particularly unique approach to supporting colleges to both innovate in their teaching practice, use new technology and apply it, and also foster links with business. Now, Wales obviously is a little bit different to the Basque Country, in as much as it's easier for them to have a central point to go to. But you also visited Technica, as it's known, in the Basque Country. What kind of opportunities would that give us to be able to both improve knowledge transfer, but also to get our teachers and lecturers to learn from business?
Yes, I think that what I found unique about Technica was that it was very much an innovation centre around teaching. So it was about trying out new pedagogy, new equipment, and that lecturers could go there and visit and learn from each other. So that was almost a knowledge transfer centre for FE lecturers themselves. I think that was a very interesting concept. And I don't think that necessarily the geography of Wales, as challenging as it is, doesn't mean that a Technica couldn't work, especially given the kind of the use of technology by now. So I think that the last 12 months has actually made Wales more accessible, because we can actually use technology a lot more efficiently now to communicate with each other rather than just rely on the A470.
Or being in Llandrindod every now and then to have a mutually inconvenient location for a meeting. No, I think you're right. David, you would have seen obviously in Technica and more widely in the Basque Country how they engage with colleges and vocational training providers to promote the practical use of the Welsh language, not just in the arts and sort of creative industries, but right across all kinds of industry, manufacturing, retail, hospitality, you name it. Karen, it actually is the case that you've got more Welsh speakers in South East Wales and more Welsh learners in South East Wales than what we would normally know as the Rural Gymraeg, the traditionally Welsh-speaking parts of Wales. What kind of support can you give employers who are looking for Welsh-speaking and competent Welsh language users in South East Wales?
I think it's probably true to say that in North Wales they've got this pegged just because of the prevalence of the language, and certainly in parts of West Wales as well. But you're right, we do have a demand for Welsh speakers, and we also have a lot of young people coming out of Welsh medium education wanting to continue with their language, albeit that sometimes they don't want to continue with their language in the technical subjects that they have selected. So although we've got some areas of maybe teaching support, maybe the care industry, these sorts of industries where we offer Welsh modules on our programmes, we also think it's really important that all of our Welsh speakers are able to continue to use their Welsh language skills in social settings. So we've got lots of activities across the college to encourage them to use their skills. We've also got a Welsh baccalaureate strand that people can join and do everything through the medium of Welsh. But I think the most important thing is to be alert that this is a growing area and that we need to look for ways to work with, and that may be Coleg Cenedlaethol Cymraeg and other organisations, to really develop the Welsh language offer that's available in all colleges.
Yeah. And Barry, Pembrokeshire College is a key player in the provision of work-based learning as well. And we know there are going to be some significant changes in how work-based learning is provided in the coming weeks and months in Wales. But FEIs and Pembrokeshire College in particular has been at the heart of provision across South Wales. Are there subtle differences in how a work-based learning provider would work with employers? Are there ways in which that can teach us in our FE colleges how to be more responsive? And indeed, how do we exploit things like personal learning accounts to help individuals who are in work but perhaps can't get onto an apprenticeship?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Iestyn. Of course, you know, the consortium that we lead spreads right across South Wales, and therefore there are regional differences in terms of where providers are based. But I think you touched on an important point. You know, in supporting local businesses, it is absolutely critical that we look at all the sort of funding streams that are available to us. The personal learning accounts are one that we're promoting as part of that energy forum, which I mentioned earlier. Obviously, the apprenticeship scheme is another one which we promote widely with our employers. The employer incentive was introduced last August and ended the end of February, and I'm really pleased to see that that has now been extended to the end of July, because I think it's initiatives like that are going to really help regenerate the economy, and I think that is really important that we actually access all those different funding streams, regardless where we're based in Wales, because the opportunities are there to help regenerate.
I just want to wrap things up and consider how we can plan more strategically together as a sector with businesses. You mentioned there, Barry, being responsive to the range of business need. And currently, David, Welsh Government organises its skilled planning into 3 regions, with potentially a 4th region starting to emerge in mid-Wales, but currently North Wales, which, you know, east and west is very different. South East Wales, urban, post-industrial in many areas, and of course, Mid and West Wales, which, as Barry pointed out, is a whole wide-ranging set of communities. How would you describe, David, the current arrangements between Welsh Government, its agents, and things like the RSPs, the Regional Skills Partnerships, the Apprenticeship Advisory Boards, and the Employment and Skills Board? Does it work effectively? Does it help you plan to be responsive, or could it be improved?
I think it certainly could be simplified, Iestyn, and it could be brought together a lot more and clarified. I think that roles and responsibilities need to be clarified between what is responsible to Welsh Government and what is responsible to regional local authority boards. But I think we have too many fingers in the pie currently, and roles and responsibilities are not always clear. I think everybody are trying their very best and everybody is adding some value. But I think if there was some rationalization of these different functions into something more focused, they could add even greater value.
And Karen, do we always hear the voice of employers and business through the current structures, or are there some voices that are being missed, do you think?
Well, I think I agree with David that the structures could be simplified. There's a lot of good people doing a lot of good work, but sometimes there's a need for the governance to be looked at, because these groups can be overly influenced by a small number of employers who engage with them, and then that loses the voice of employers they don't engage with. And so sometimes we are given information that this is what this sector needs, and it is completely at odds with what the employers we deal with tell us. But one of the things I would, if we're going to round up about collaboration and strength, I think Barry gave a great example of the Employment Bureau in Pembrokeshire. And I think my college, like others, went to visit Pembrokeshire to have a look at this, to see how we could all work more closely with employers and better meet their needs. And across the FE sector, we're really good at sharing this good practice. So with working with these boards, it is really important that we get the opportunity to engage with them and to share our experiences and to share our intelligence, so that we've got much richer information on which to base the needs. But one of the things that the report says very clearly is that vocational education builds on the broader notion of capability rather than just competency. We've all learned over the last 12 months that things are changing, and they're changing really rapidly. So what we need is people who can adapt rapidly to change. And that's why it's really important that the structures are simplified, that we make sure the intelligence that is being gathered and used to evaluate what needs to be done incorporates everything we know as being a key part of the businesses that we work with across our communities.
So I guess it's important that these skills bodies, skills planning functions talk about those competencies as much as the qualification and the capabilities. We get that dialogue together, the ability to be able to understand a problem, to see how transversal skills help us improve our skills mix. For each of you as well, we'll be delivering A levels, and I know during these podcasts we haven't talked much about core skills, essential skills, and A levels. But what is the role, Barry, for A level provision in helping not just those individuals who are going to go on to university, but some of those individuals who actually might use their A levels as a bridge into employment?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Just because a student has followed their A levels, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to progress to university. And likewise, just because the learner has followed a vocational route at level 3 doesn't mean they're not going to go to university. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, the critical thing is to get the learner on the right course that suits them. Progression post level 3 provision, whether, as I said, be vocational or academic, can go into a whole multitude of routes. And I don't think we need to be so prescriptive. I think that's really important.
Well, skills planning, David, can we easily reconcile and balance the needs of the employer and the needs of the learner? Is that always going to be a challenge, but is it something that can be done successfully?
Yes, I think it is going to be a challenge, because naturally the employer is looking for the exact skills that they want in their particular setting. Yeah, and naturally we don't want to straitjacket the individual with that set of skills. We want to give them a broader set of skills, because we recognize, and it's understood by now, that people will be in probably on average about 8 posts during their careers these days. Unlike perhaps my generation, where we've stayed in post for many, many years, it's going to be very different for the next generation. And therefore we've got to give them those more generic rounded skills which will allow them to be transferable from one setting to another. So I think there is going to be a slight conflict there between those generic skills that we wish to give them and the more specific skills that an individual employer would be looking for. However, I think employers, when you talk to them, what they are more concerned about are things like the communication skills of young people, their literacy and numeracy. You know, they're the kinds of very basic things that an employer will very often raise with you, not actually that they haven't used a particular lathe that may be in their workshop. So I think we need to listen carefully as well to what employers are saying, because I think they are saying that they really do need the generic skills.
Well, listening and responding to business, supporting the learner is key, it sounds to me. And I certainly hope through the policy priorities that we're putting for the next Welsh Government, so that by working with government, working with the employers, and importantly working with our learners themselves, we can help build a better and stronger and deeper skills base here in Wales. and to support our many and diverse community. So to you all, thanks for joining this panel. Thank you for your contribution. And those of you who've been listening, don't forget, you can follow our podcasts by visiting collegae.cymru. You can look for our series of podcasts on your podcast provider. There too, on our website, you will find our policy asks document. And for further information relating to the Senate election of 2021, please look at that online resource. And we hope you found this appetite of interest. We're keen to hear your thoughts and encourage you to leave a comment or question. So please do get in touch via policypod@collegaecymru.ac.uk. We've got one more podcast looking at the policy asks for the next Welsh Government, and also a series of podcasts looking at topics such as the role of work-based learning in more detail in post-secondary education, an episode looking specifically at the question of Welsh language provision and bilingual delivery. And we'd like to hear from you as to what policy topics for further education you'd like us to cover. So please get in touch and please share these podcasts with your colleagues.